Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mihail Neamțu, and I'm very glad that I have a distinct pleasure to welcome on our show, the voice of freedom, Theodore Dalrymple, one of the best British writer in our lifetime. And of course, it's a great pleasure to welcome you here in Bucharest. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Mulțumesc.
Beautiful. We've started our conversation this morning by talking about your visits to Romania and actually to Eastern Europe in the late 80s.
Yes.
And you told us that you saw the collapse of the Marxist ideology of the communist regimes in those days.
Yes.
What made you think that communism would eventually collapse?
Well, I wasn't particularly foresighted. I mean, by the time I was in Romania, it was actually about 3 months before the downfall of Ceausescu. So
That's September 89.
Something like that, yes.
Or August.
Something like that. I can't remember the exact date. So by then it was evident. I mean, Ceausescu, of course, was holding out against what was going on in the rest of Eastern Europe, but I didn't believe that that he could hold out for very long. And I was interested in these kind of, because I wanted to see it before it completely disappeared. Just as I'd gone to Rhodesia in Africa to see a colonial regime before the colonial regime disappeared. So I wanted to experience something that I thought was historically very important, but was about to disappear.
You visited 2 colonies. One was a Soviet colony, and that's Romania, and Rhodesia was the former British colony?
Former British colony, which of course had declared its independence because the British wanted to decolonize it, and the colonials there wanted everything to remain the same. So it was an interesting contrast, and it was 13 years. My visits were 13 years apart.
Wow. So Karl Marx is a very interesting figure, not because he was born in Trier, Germany. Karl Marx was a German philosopher, as Leszek Kolakowski puts it in his wonderful book, Main Currents of Marxism. But he was also someone who spent a great deal of time in Britain.
Yes.
He was friends with Engels. We had Marx and Engels. You had Marx and Spencer, I used to say. And so he was buried in London.
Yes, in Highgate Cemetery. And in fact, I want to write a book about Highgate Cemetery because I wrote a book about Père Lachaise about unknown writers in Père Lachaise, and I want to do the same for Highgate Cemetery. And of course, he is the great attraction for Highgate Cemetery, which is a very beautiful cemetery, actually.
Yes, but even more interesting are the ideological cemeteries that he left behind. We've seen the collapse of many countries because of communism.
Yes, but I wouldn't say that that his influence is over. Far from it. And as we see,
the ruins of Marxism are still present. Yeah,
not only the ruins, but the attempt at resuscitation of the. If you can resuscitate ruins, I'm not sure that that's quite the right word. But if you look at the election in the United States, for example, in New York. I would not have believed that the candidate Mamdani would have been possible ever in the United States, and yet it looks. We don't know whether he will win, but
he speaks fluently Arabic.
Yes, and but also he speaks
the jargon of Marxism too.
Fluent Marxism. Yes.
What do you? Why do you think Marx is still appealing to lots of people?
I suppose because of a kind of utopian mindset that there is some possibility of all human problems being solved. I can remember when I was a student, there were Marxists who thought that even personal problems would be solved if only a Marxist
centralized government would be in place.
Well, a Marxist government, which would, of course, have withered away. I mean, as he actually, the utopia was a kind of anarchism where there was no central government, there was administration, but no politics. which I suppose is a bit like the European Union, actually. but so it appeals to a certain kind of mind which thinks that there is a total solution to all human problems. But also it appeals to resentment and hatred, which is always, I mean, resentment and hatred are the most powerful
engines of political revolutions
or political emotions, actually. People hate the rich much more than they love the poor, in my opinion, in my experience.
In your experience. Now, Marx again, was a thinker, was a philosopher. He spent a great deal of time criticizing capitalism. There are many reasons to still criticize capitalists, not capitalism per se.
Yes. The thing about him is I think that his fundamental criticism is of the division of labor. And he came to that conclusion before he knew anything about how before he
studied Das Kapital.
Yes, well before he really studied economics. So in fact, I think he, like many people actually, the conclusion came first and
the evidence later, and even a shaky one.
And I think, I mean, that is a danger for us all, of course, because we are all very attached.
Prejudiced.
We are all very attached to our conclusions and are very reluctant to alter our conclusions. But I think his was a clear view that the division of labor was an evil because and that was for anthropological or philosophical reasons that he thought it was an evil, because he thought it alienated people and so on. And he thought it could be overcome. So the idea of a man being a fisherman in the morning and a weaver in the afternoon and a poet in the evening, that was his view.
Utopia, yeah. Not even Ceausescu was able to live like that. You've been here again in Bucharest in probably, again, the August of 1989. You've met interesting intellectuals, people like Professor Andrei Pleșu,
yes,
who was a very influential mentor for many of the young students of my generation. And what did you make of Romania? I mean, how did you see the country? Because there were a lot of inequalities then to be discovered.
Yes, I mean, it had, of course, an extremely strong flavor, I could put it. And when I come into Bucharest this time, I remember for example, the tree-lined avenues. In those days, there was no traffic.
No cars, too.
No cars. There were very few people on the street. And if you were walking along and there was someone behind you, your immediate thought was that you were being followed.
By Securitate.
By Securitate and so on. And
all the people were in the factories.
Yes.
At 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, making or not making things that
which were of no use. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they were of a certain kind of use because they kept them disciplined, but kept them occupied at any rate.
No, in reality, we've exported in those days lots of tractors and lots of cars to the third world. I mean, it's clear that Africa, for instance, which you visited, appreciated some of our goods, locomotives, tractors and cars too.
Mainly faute de mieux. I mean, they were not well made or anything like that. And of course, he did pay. I mean, he had an obsession, if I remember rightly, with the foreign debt. So he wanted to reduce or to zero,
to nullify, to reduce to zero,
debt, and this was a way to do it.
What did you discuss with those intellectuals you've met, including Andrei Pleșu?
Well, if I remember rightly, and of course it's quite a long time ago now, they were very pessimistic. I can't remember who told me that at that time they thought that the return of King Michael was the only solution for Romania.
The Return of the King, what a beautiful title.
Yes, that's what they thought, or some
He
thought.
did return, in fact.
He did return, but not as king, of course.
Yes.
And also they, on the whole, they thought that it would take several generations to recover from the deformation of any society that communism produced.
Were you in touch with Jessica Douglas Home?
Yes, I
She was very much interested in Romania.
Yes,
and she did support lots of intellectuals, indeed.
She did, and actually, I remember on the tube, the underground, on my way to the airport, I was learning their addresses, and I was learning a few words of Romanian, which I have forgotten, and I had to remember these things and then tear up the paper and throw it away because but of course the Securitate knew that I was visiting these people because I was detained for a few minutes at the airport.
Interesting.
So they knew
who you were.
Well, they knew that I was not just an ordinary tourist. And in fact, I hired a car to go around the whole country. I drove around the whole country.
Did you visit Transylvania?
Yeah, I did, yes.
Did you buy a house like King Charles III?
No,
in Viscri?
I don't think you could in
in those days it was not legal, yes.
Yeah. So I would have done, of course. And Jessica Douglas Hume has restored a village in Transylvania, which I visited, I can't remember how many years ago.
She was in charge with Eminescu Trust, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
there was an
right.
interesting gentleman called Ion Rațiu in London who was also trying to provide, the Romanian intelligentsia with books, information, and so on and so forth. What's interesting, and that's something maybe you don't know, is that right after 1989, the first visitor from the United States was George Soros. And he came with a very specific goal to establish a network of foundations and NGOs, which would, of course, celebrate the ideas of Karl Popper initially, but later on also of Karl Marx.
Yes.
And some of these intellectuals, not all of them, but some of them fell into the trap. Unfortunately, I'm just saying it in retrospect, the trap of embracing a kind of progressive liberalism, which George Soros is still hailing, together with the candidate from New York, and
many other
and many others,
and district attorneys who won't prosecute criminals and things like that.
Exactly. So because Marx is still dominating the intellectual scene in many parts of the world, including America, including many prestigious universities. That's why we thought we could begin by talking about Marx. But Marx is not the only culprit. There were other individuals like Friedrich Nietzsche who destroyed in a way the belief of the West in itself, that the West could be a civilizing force.
Well, he thought that was going to happen anyway, so he was a kind of a prophet, if you like. He thought of himself as a prophet, and he's
the son of a pastor.
The son of a pastor, and he thought
of a Protestant pastor.
He saw the collapse or the disappearance of Christianity as a kind of inevitable development, and he thought that this would have enormous effects. And in that sense, he was right. He was right.
God is taught.
But what he proposed in its place was, in my opinion, rather unattractive. And like many people, he found there's a partial truth, just as there's a partial truth in Marx. The partial truth in Marx is that people are often motivated by economic factors and economic desires. That's
a reality,
It's a reality, and it's just...
We can acknowledge
it. In fact,
it,
it's a common sense. You don't really need to be a philosopher, or you don't really
to discover that people need to eat, for instance.
Yes.
Or they want better clothes.
Oh, yes. This is perfectly obvious to everybody. And Nietzsche was perhaps a bit more subtle. He knew that, for example, the desire to be humanitarian could also be a desire to be dominating and
to treat others like slaves.
Yes, and also the victim culture. He was a prophet of the victim culture, if you like.
He anticipated.
He anticipated that. But personally, he was a very odd man, and I think that quite a lot. And I'm at one, I think, with Thomas Mann, who thought that quite a lot of it came from his tertiary syphilis. Actually.
Let's go into that, because you're a psychiatrist. I did not
Yes.
mention this, but thank you for your likes, subscribe. We are very, very honored to have Theodore Dalrymple here in Bucharest. He just visited our country, our city, and he just launched 2 books, in fact. One, which is a Romanian translation of Our Culture, What's Left of It. This is the Romanian version. Beautiful publication by Contramudum Publishing House. We thank the editor of this beautiful book. And another one, a book which describes how modern psychology destroys morality in a way,
Yes,
right?
yes.
This was a very successful event, and thank you for being with us. Again, the question is why Friedrich Nietzsche was very much inclined to say things which were outrageous, and why do you believe his personal disease had something to do with it?
Well, I mean, his personal biography actually fits in very well with a man suffering from a condition which is never seen now, and which we've all forgotten about, called general paralysis of the insane. And one of the
That's syphilis?
Syphilis. It's a long-term consequence of syphilis. And
which is a sexual disease transmitted
sexually.
Sexually, obviously, which was a common disease in the 19th century.
Extremely common. I mean,
you'd have to go to a brothel, or not necessarily.
Well, not necessarily, because husbands and wives were
affected,
were infected with it. So, I mean, I did a bit of research on the history of British newspapers in the 1850s, and what was very interesting to me was that half of the proprietors or editors also sold medicines. And the medicines they sold, half of them were either to prevent or treat syphilis. Mm-hmm. So it was a very common disease, and it was very much feared, quite rightly, of course. Mm-hmm. And anyway, the course of general paralysis of the insane, often, and a description, for example, I was reading a description of people with general paralysis of the insane, in a textbook of neurology published in 1950 or 1951 by the great British neurologist called Russell Brain, the 4th edition, and it exactly fits the biography of Nietzsche, where someone lives a pathetic life, but has a huge grandiosity of self-importance, of self-inflation, followed by gradual decline into amentia. You continue to live without speaking, without thought, without anything.
He died, I think, on the 20th of August, 1900.
Yes.
He died pretty young. He was 44, something like that.
Yes.
46.
I think he might have been slightly older. I think he was born in the
1944.
In 1844. So he would have been 56.
Sorry, 56 indeed. Yeah. And he ended up cursing God, calling himself the Antichrist, saying...
Yes, and saying, I am dynamite. And here was a man who was...
a philosopher with a hammer.
Yes, with whose actual life was a rather pathetic one, because he was living in very, very reduced circumstances. He didn't really know people, and so on. He was obviously he was a very
gifted, very smart,
very gifted man, brilliant man.
Das Geburt der Tragödie, I think, was written when he was 24.
Yes.
Almost completely changed the way philologists and historians of antiquity looked at the Greek culture.
And he was the youngest professor of...
in Bern.
Yes.
Exactly. He was very gifted indeed. He was the new Dionysus, yes, in a way, but he was very unhappy in his love life.
Yes. And
he
his
did not
life
have a
in
wife.
General.
Yes.
But anyway, he became more and more grandiose, actually, as his life became more and more pathetic. And this is fairly typical of general paralysis of the insane. And as I said, the last stage of his life, I think it was 10 years that he was almost mute. And again, that is something that happens in general paralysis of the insane.
So he criticized theology, he criticized Platonism, he criticized the great tradition of Western Christianity. I don't think he knew much about Eastern Christianity. And he said, instead of God, we should celebrate life. We should also become like aesthetes, if I'm not mistaken here.
Yeah.
And somehow you should...
And heroes.
And?
Heroes.
And heroes, exactly. And we should sculpt, so to speak, our destiny in such a way that we are all like artists.
Yes.
Right? This is the kind of path that he's showing us. If you want to be an Übermensch, you have to become an aesthete and an artist.
Yes.
Now, of course, the problem is that the masses, you talk here about the mandarins and the masses do not actually want to be artists necessarily.
And are not capable of it.
Are not capable of it. And so they end up ingesting and digesting pop culture.
Yes. Where there is a kind of exaggerated individualism which replaces the desire or is in place of the desire to be an artist. And I'm interested in such phenomena as graffiti, for example.
Exactly.
What does the presence of graffiti everywhere,
which is a stain even in our city, unfortunately.
It is. And there is one difference between Bucharest that I noticed and London and Paris. In London and Paris, on the whole, it's not 100%, the graffiti are put on horrible surfaces, terrible surfaces, ugly surfaces. And the people who do that are in effect making a comment there. I don't think they know that they're doing it, but they're making a comment on the ugliness of the world because they don't, on the whole, deface elegant buildings. Even though they could, because they could do it because we know that they are, in fact, extremely gifted at going to difficult and dangerous places to put their graffiti.
I've seen a cathedral, though, in England, which was stained by this.
Yes, but that was with the
ideological
of the church,
approval of the church.
And even there, they got the graffiti wrong because those graffiti that they put on are obviously not those that you see on the walls done by, shall we say, the lower orders. So,
but that's an interesting remark. So the masses embrace the graffiti culture. Why?
They embrace it because they need to impose themselves. We have a kind of, I suppose, a celebrity culture where to be is to be noticed. And most people can't really be noticed.
The 15 minutes of fame.
The 15 minutes of, the 15 seconds of fame. And it's quite interesting, the ethics or the code of practice, shall we say, of the graffiti artists, if that's, again, that is...
a debatable word.
A debatable word in this context. But they have this kind of ethic where if the wall, which is terra nullius, belongs to no one until they have put their mark on it. And once they put their mark on it, no one will come and put another mark on it. So they've claimed it for themselves, if you see what I mean. And,
yes.
And
it's an appropriation.
It is an appropriation and a mark of their existence and of their supposed individuality. Of course, it's not really individuality, but it's also a little like the vogue for tattooing.
Yes,
it's very similar, in my opinion, and they're making a mark on society. They're being a hero, a Nietzschean hero, but in a rather
bizarre way,
pathetic.
Yeah.
Actually, it's right. It's sad. Fundamentally, it's a sad phenomenon.
It's also a pursuit of authenticity. That's why people right? Dress this way, paint their hair this way. Of course, we would call it vulgar, but at the same time, there's a lot of noise, which reminds me of heavy metal music.
Yes.
Right? There is a certain correspondence between the graffitis, this kind of dress, and this kind of hair color, plus the music they
And there's
typically listen to.
another manifestation, which I don't think you probably have in Romania, but is very marked in Britain and in France, and especially in the United States, but also in Brazil, is the way that people give their own children names which are completely made up. So that
Elon Musk is part of this trend.
Yes, well, probably, yes.
But he's a technocrat, so he doesn't count as a part of... He's a Mandarin. He's not part of the masses.
Well, he's but they play at being part of the
masses.
Yes, they play at it, obviously, like Zuckerberg appears
in a T-shirt.
You know, and I wonder why. Is it really his taste, or is he trying...
Or lack of it.
Or lack of taste, yes. It's often the same thing nowadays.
At least Nietzsche had some good taste.
Yes.
He liked Wagner. He liked proper music.
But what they're trying to do is distract people's attention from the fact that they are the masters of the universe, and they know that people hate wealth, so they don't want to appear wealthy.
And they come with T-shirts, Occupy Mars, Mars, and such other slogans.
Yes. So I don't know. I mean, of course, I've never spoken to them, so I don't know what their motives are, and perhaps they don't even know what their motives are themselves. But anyhow,
let's move on with this analysis of mass culture. In the 60s, if I'm not mistaken, you had like rock bands and punk bands like Sex Pistols, and
I think that was 70s.
In the 70s, right?
Because if you take the Beatles, for example,
it's a different story.
It's a different story. I mean, it's still
a Yellow Submarine, but it's a different story.
Yes, I mean they were. I mean they did create melodies.
Exactly. There is still melos and logos.
Yes.
But not with Sex Pistols.
But and in fact, it's a deliberate. I mean, they actually acknowledged that they had no
intent,
no musical ability whatsoever. And but it's very interesting. Unusually, I wouldn't normally do this, but I did read a biography of Sid Vicious.
Mm-hmm.
Now you might think, well, why am I reading a biography of Sid Vicious? But what was very interesting about it was that Sid Vicious was actually an intelligent man and was capable of writing sensitive letters. So in a way, the viciousness of Sid Vicious was play acting. A lot of this is just play acting. It's a kind of extreme form of Marie Antoinette playing shepherdess. And another example was a man for whom I have some regard, and I've temporarily forgotten his name. He was a man who had polio and whose most famous song was "Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick." And he was a highly intelligent man. And I, again, rather unusually, I read his obituary in the Times because he died rather early. And it said that he like many of them, he came from a respectable middle-class background. And he said, the
artist.
The obituarist said that when he went to school, he was horrified by the false gentility of the school and therefore adopted a more proletarian mode of speech in the name of authenticity.
Of course, yeah.
So you abandon the speech that comes naturally to adopt another form of speech in the name of authenticity. So this, of course, is a contradiction. I suppose you could say that what is natural to you is what is authentic. You can change it. You can change it for something that you think is better. But he didn't change it because it was better. He changed it because he thought it was more authentic.
And this
his mode
cult
of
of
speech.
authenticity has something to do with postmodernism.
Yes.
Now, I'm somehow pressed by our limited time here, but I still want to ask you something. There is a tendency these days to talk a lot about mental illness.
Yes.
It's something, even when I was younger, I couldn't quite hear. I mean, but today everybody's talking about this.
Everyone is mentally ill.
Why?
I
I mean, if they would talk only about the Davos people, I would agree. But they talk about everybody.
Well, everybody else. Yeah.
Everybody else.
Yeah. No, I think it's part of a movement to self-obsession without real self-examination. So people like to talk endlessly about themselves without actually revealing anything truly about themselves. And of course, it provides a ready-made excuse or explanation for one's failures.
Sentimentalism, individualism, narcissism.
Yes.
Yeah, they all come together in a package.
Yes, and it's an individualism without individuality, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's an inflamed individualism, but without true individuality. But if you, I once, when the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Medical Psychiatric Association was published, the 5th edition, I added up all the prevalences, the maximum prevalences, admittedly, given in the manual. I added them up. And I came to the conclusion that the average person in Western society suffers from 2.5 mental illnesses a year.
Well, you do not spend, I'm told, too much time with the church fathers, but there's an interesting writer called Maximus the Confessor, who says that philautia, the love for yourself, a kind of deranged love for yourself, of that moi haïsable about which Blaise Pascal used to speak, is a sign of general, disorder, and to love yourself just because you are who you are, that's not good enough. You have to pursue a greater goal.
I could. There was a vogue. It slightly declined for explaining one's defects by saying that one does not have enough self-esteem. And my patients, quite often, they would come and say they do not have self-esteem. And I would say, well, at least you have one thing right.
Pretty punchy remark, yeah.
And instead they were not angry. They started laughing because at some level of their minds they knew that this was a completely bogus idea, that self-esteem, lack of self-esteem explained anything. And in fact, of course, if you even consider whether you have self-esteem or you don't have self-esteem, you're already lost. There's self-esteem. What I used to say to them is self-respect is something very different. Self-respect is a discipline and requires you to think of other people so that you present yourself in a certain way to other people. And now if you look in the street, how many people have any kind of self-respect? But they have self-esteem. They think they're important, and they think they have rights and so on, but they're not thinking of self-respect.
Let me ask you, because you touched this onto this point. You've seen probably, obviously, in the past 2 decades or so, an obsession with sexuality, and obviously there are like people hearing from celebrities in Hollywood, what a good sex life looks like, and they are like maybe average individuals, and they can't compete with those celebrities, but they still think that being an alpha male in terms of human sexuality is a very important thing for success in life, and they feel miserable because they are not competitive enough. And this maybe has something to do with another obsession, which is Freud's obsession with infant sexuality.
Yes.
How would you place Sigmund Freud in this general history of the Western psyche?
Well, I think one of the terrible things about Freudianism, and although, of course, psychoanalysis has almost disappeared from the world apart from in France and Argentina, where it, for some reason, it retains...
Very interesting. In Argentina, they still do it.
And a little bit in Brazil also. But apart from that, it's almost disappeared. I think the most disastrous effect of Freud was the idea that uncovering the supposed cause, usually trauma, of course, of your problems will resolve them in itself. And that idea, in my view, is complete nonsense. But in fact, has the effect of maintaining people in their condition, because, of course, they can always say, well, the true cause has not yet been found, which is why people who do go in for psychoanalysis can be in psychoanalysis for 25 years, and it doesn't seem to improve them. In fact, it turns them into terrible bores and causes them to be self-obsessed without genuine thought about their lives, in my opinion. So this idea that the past determines completely the present until whatever it is in the past caused your present problems, that idea is a disastrous one, both personally and, I think, in society as a whole.
It makes you a victim?
It turns you into a victim, however privileged you actually are by comparison with all previously existing humanity. So that very privileged people can think of themselves as victims just as much. I mean, there are victims in the world. There are
real victims.
There are real victims, of course.
You just have to look into Ukraine or Gaza or other places,
where, people
who suffer,
who really suffer, and not from
self-inflicted or imaginary wounds,
or even slight ones. I mean, because, of course, it is perfectly true that no parent is a perfect parent. All parents make mistakes and so on and so forth. But to dwell on those mistakes as if they determine the whole of your existence in the future is to turn people into objects rather than subjects. And I think that has been the main disastrous effect of Freud. And with regard to sexuality, he did actually believe that it had to be controlled. He was not a free-for-all man.
He was not Erich Fromm.
No, he wasn't. On the contrary, actually, he was. And you look at him. I mean, who could be more bourgeois than
Freud? Yes. Now you come from a generation of people, and we all admired Britain because you managed to defeat Germany, Nazi Germany. You've built an empire, and I know it sounds very outrageous for some people, but it's still very impressive when you look at the history of Britain. And we admire the great geniuses you've produced in that little island. So many geniuses were able to discover the mysteries of the universe, from Isaac Newton to those who discovered the DNA and so on at King's College London. Just in a parenthesis. So the question is, what happened to Britain? Because the Britain that we loved, the Britain of your father's generation, the Brits of your father's generation, seem to be in a minority these days.
Yes, well, there's been a kind of gestalt switch, so that those things which we valued or thought were good were now regarded as deleterious. And there's an interesting example in British theatre. up till 1956, the most famous English playwright was a man called Terence Rattigan. And Terence Rattigan's plays, which are extremely good, not described, but illustrated the emotional restraint, which actually led to extremely powerful emotion. And there was this paradox that no emotion was expressed, but great emotion was actually felt.
Just like the butler in The Remains of the Day.
Yes, yeah. Now, in 1956, a play called Look Back in Anger by John Osborne was presented, and it completely pushed aside Rattigan as the great playwright of the era. So there was an actual
Divide.
And of course Suez was very important as well. And then we changed. So we've changed from the view that you should control your emotions and not express them in public, not impose them on other people, changed to we must impose our emotions on other people. We must express our emotions, because if we don't express our emotions, then they become a kind of emotional abscess within one, and it comes out in some dreadful way. And the extreme example of that is a patient, a murderer actually, who'd killed his wife, who said, "I had to kill her, doctor, or I don't know what I would have done." So,
shocking, yeah.
Yeah. So in other words, the worst thing to do is not to express yourself. And so we have all forms of self-expression. Self-expression is regarded as a good in itself, in its most extreme forms. And
now,
any form of self-control is regarded as harmful.
Now, because we are coming to a close, I was just wondering what would be your recipe, because obviously we've criticized a lot of individuals, yes, and philosophies and mindsets, but a return to Stoicism, or what would you embrace as a solution?
Well, I think that's always a very difficult question, and people always ask me that, and I never have any answer. All I can say...
Sense of humor is part of it, at least.
Yes,
that's what I see in you.
But even that is being
dangerous.
It's being destroyed, actually. It's being destroyed. I mean, our politicians...
Because humor is offensive.
It offends somebody, usually. I mean, if you say anything, it must offend someone. So the best thing is not to say anything. To continue to talk, but not to say anything.
So not like a monk being silent in his cell, but rather to keep chatting without saying anything.
Loquacious, without loquacity, without content, as it were.
Without meaning, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't. Even the idea of a recipe is, in fact, rather dangerous, because it suggests that
there is a universal method,
there's a method, and there's a blueprint that you have in your mind. I have no blueprint. All I can do anyway, the recipe for me, is to write about it and to talk about it. But I can't say, well, I think from now on the government must mandate a sense of humor in the population, and if they we must talk ironically all the time, as we once did. When I was young, everyone spoke in irony, and it was understood that you were speaking ironically. Now irony is more or less forbidden, and everything is taken literally. So I don't have an answer to your question. All I can do is what I can do, which is write and so on.
You've met great people. One of them was Roger Scruton, and yes, he was pretty able to somehow carry on with his conservative philosophy. While he was attacked, he was still very civil, managed to maintain his cool. What do you think made him so special?
Well, that's very difficult. What makes anyone very special? One of the things that he experienced was 1968 in Paris, and that turned him that made him conservative, because he saw what he saw.
The ugliness of
He didn't see liberation; he saw destruction. He saw the destruction of a civilization to which he was attached, which he admired, and then he saw that there was much preservation. Change is important, but preservation is important, and so that was a turning point, I believe, a turning point for him. But then that doesn't explain everything, because other people saw what he saw without having that reaction to it.
But just like you, he delved into writing and reading. He spent a lot of time in the library. He came to Bucharest. I saw him many times. In the morning, he was reading great texts,
Yes.
the great canon of the Western culture. And obviously, he loved hunting. He also was into music
And wine.
And in a sense, he was also close to religion as a social and spiritual phenomenon, at the end, at least.
Yes, I was never quite sure what he actually believed. I know that he believed that religion was a very
Important institution, yeah.
important institution, and he was prepared to take part. I mean, he was the organist of his local church. What he actually believed inside, I'm not quite
We
sure.
could ask Spinoza about that.
Yeah. So,
But even participating in a ritual like that, a
Yes.
Sunday service, can help one
well,
survive.
and also it's a discipline, and people don't want it. Most people now, anyway, do not want that. They rebel against any kind of discipline. So they're prepared to say, I am spiritual but not religious. Well, a religion imposes a discipline, and being spiritual imposes wind chimes and hanging crystals and doing that kind of thing, which is no discipline at all.
One discipline is also reading. In our tradition, in our Christian tradition, to read the Bible, to read the great texts,
Yes.
to read the ancient scriptures was part of one's spiritual discipline. And maybe one day we will see you write about such great texts
Yes.
coming from the old times.
Yeah, well, I'm rather old to start now.
But Mr. Dalrymple, this was a beautiful conversation for which I'm very grateful. Thank you for visiting Bucharest again.
Thank
you for
very
coming.
much, and thank you very much for inviting me.
And we are left with this thought that discipline is perhaps the gateway to freedom, to real freedom and responsibility. And I'm Mihail Neamțu, and I thank you for watching this show. Thank you. Bye-bye.